this might be one of the most outrageous cases I've seen, and so Stephen Donziger was a human rights lawyer, an activist, um, challenging power, all things that any self-respecting lawyer who understands how corrupt the system should be doing. Instead of serving corporations, he was working on behalf of the people being screwed by the corporations. And the biggest case that he was a part of was this when he sued Chevron on behalf of farmers and the indigenous people in Ecuador. He sued them because Chevron had been dumping billions of gallons of oil and toxic chemicals in these people's land, and the usual side effects from things like that: reckless corporate abuse of people. The There was increase in birth defects and increase in cancers and death and chronic disease and all those things. Their lands were destroyed, of course, and all that. So, on behalf of 30,000 people in Ecuador, Stephen Donziger sued Chevron for compensation. He won the trial. They have to pay $10 billion to uh, they have to pay $10 billion to the people who sued them, the indigenous people in Ecuador. And because of that, in retaliation, Chevron went balls to the wall after Stephen Donziger personally. And so what had happened was a judge who is part of the Federalist Society. And for those of you who don't know, it's an organization of a bunch of right wing lunatic conservative judges who the Republicans always they go to these lists of Federalist Society approved lawyers and judges, and anytime there's an opening on like for a judge position, they'll nominate one of them. A judicial position, they'll nominate, or they'll put all their weight into trying to get somebody on that list to into the uh, position onto the bench. Like they did with Brett Kavanaugh, and I believe Neil Gorsuch was on the list for the Federalist Society, and all these other well, most of the judges are right wing anyway. But there was a judge, and they ruled that Donziger was first Chevron demanded that Donziger hand over his notes on or hand over all of his documents that from on the trial, all his documents, which would have included privileged conversations between him and his clients, which is unprecedented. So he said he wasn't going to do that without a court order, and then the judge put him in contempt, which is bullshit because he said he would do it if there was a court order, but there was no official court order, and so the judge put him in contempt, and because of that, the contempt charge, he's been on house arrest for over 2 years. 2 years. I believe he got disbarred over this. Oh, and by the way, I skipped this part. Shouldn't have. So, the Federalist Society takes a whole bunch of fucking money from Chevron, right? So this judge has a financial conflict of interest or some kind of conflict of interest between Chevron and the Federalist Society, which they're a member of. And so the judge puts Stephen Donziger in contempt for not handing over privileged documents, which he shouldn't have. And what normally happens with a contempt charge, you'd have to have a prosecutor bring the charge and try the case and prosecute whoever they're claiming is in contempt. Um, the Department of Justice declined to do it. So the judge appointed a private law firm to try Stephen Donziger. This law firm represents Chevron. So They literally, Chevron is prosecuting a human rights lawyer in a sham case, a sham trial, with a judge that's also on the take. And because of that, the whole thing has been a fucking sham from the beginning. And like I said, 2 years of his life has been spent on house arrest over bullshit in retaliation because he won. He took on Chevron in court and he won on behalf of the people that they poisoned. And his punishment is being disbarred, which is a huge thing for a lawyer to be disbarred. You spend your whole fucking life trying to go to law school, graduating law school, building your career as a lawyer, and then to be disbarred, that means you can't practice law anymore. So they take his license over this, and he's been sitting in his fucking on house arrest, similar to how Julian Assange was sitting locked up in the Ecuadorian embassy on house arrest for 2 years, over 2 years now. And just last week or the week before, the judge on the take and by the way, there was no jury in this trial. The judge waived his right to have a jury at the trial off of some bullshit rule that's apparently been used a lot lately, where the judge can deny somebody a right to a jury trial if they agree to limit the prison sentence to 6 months. And so the judge agreed to limit the sentence to maximum. The sentence could be with 6 months and waive the jury trial. But Stephen wanted the jury trial because he knew it was bullshit, and he wanted somebody who wasn't on the take for Chevron to have to be able to intervene on this case on his behalf. And any jury presented with the evidence would have found him not guilty and released him. But again, the judge waived the jury trial, and then stretch this motherfucker out over 2.5 years while this man's been sitting on house arrest, locked up in his apartment in New York. And then now, rules on the contempt charge finally 2.5 years later, and finds him guilty, and then sentences him to 6 months in jail. So, and he doesn't get time served for the 2 years that he was waiting on house arrest for the verdict and sentencing. So they're trying to take 3 years of this man's life because he challenged Chevron over their polluting and destroying the lives of thousands and thousands of Ecuadorians. And the entire legal system is going along with this fucking sham. So, like I talked about in the before I get there, actually, this is what they do to anybody who challenges power. This is how they respond to anybody who takes it upon themselves to actually push back against the fucking oligarchy and the corporate state that we live, the corporate-owned society that we live in. Anybody who decides to push back on that on behalf of regular poor people being screwed, they will unleash the hounds of hell on you in retaliation. And like I mentioned earlier, this is very similar to what happened with Julian Assange. Truth teller, somebody who's on the right side of history, publishes documents on war crimes to the U.S. government. And it's not the war criminals in prison. It's not the war criminals who had their lives destroyed. It's not the people on fucking tape murdering innocent civilians, whoever saw the inside of a courtroom. It's the journalist who published that information and let the public know what was going on, what the public had the right to know what was going on. That's the only person in prison. And in a couple of days, Julian Assange, there's going to be a hearing on the appeal for his extradition. And this is what they do to truth tellers. And that's exactly what's happening with Stephen Donziger. And this is gross. And like I mentioned in that video I did about the Exxon lobbyists who exposed what they actually know and how much they know they're contributing to the climate apocalypse and how much they're actually fighting any action to avert catastrophe. Well, and he said in that video, everything that they're doing is legal. The pollution and all of the bribing politicians to not do anything about it, all of it's legal. So, and again with this Stephen Donziger case, one can argue everything that they're doing is technically legal. They might violated some ethics rules or some things like that, but you can't. I don't think that there's been any laws broken. So again, these laws are completely made up by corrupt politicians. I might add, serving their own self interest, and these laws are harming society and they're harming the public, and completely unjust and indefensible. So, and again, back to the climate crisis. They'll tell us, "Oh, yeah, they're destroying the planet, but you got to go around, you got to follow the right protocols, and you got to challenge them in the correct ways, and you got to take them to court and all those things." Okay, you take them to court, and then you win, and then they do you like Stephen Donziger. So more and more, it just seems unrealistic to rely on politicians, to rely on the legal system, to rely on judges, the courts, to do anything to save humanity. They're not going to. They're all in on the fucking grift. So again, what options do we have left? Because you take them to court and they do you like Stephen Donziger. They will ruin your life, lock you up, and take your law license. And again, we have like 8 years left to do something about this. And this is how hard they're fighting over a lot. It wasn't even to like shut the corporation down or anything like that. It was a $10 billion settlement, and they have the money. But in retaliation, they're gonna do Stephen Donziger the way they're doing it. So, and you think they're just gonna roll over some type of legal challenge or some type of legislation to actually put them out of business? No, they're fucking not. And like I said, we have 8 years. So how we get out of this, I'm interested in hearing what you guys think. But I definitely want to talk about that Stephen Donziger case because it's outrageous. And he's appealing it, but the way that the legal system works, his appeal won't even be heard until after his sentence. So this whole shit is fucked. This whole shit is fucked. You see what's happening in the live chat. DOG, oh yeah, you said, "Oh, glad you brought up this $600 payment monitoring. My friend got his entire PayPal shut down because they wanted extensive documents so that when his 600 rolls out, they can give it all up." Yeah, and I saw Jenna yelling, lying ass, talking about, "Oh no, trust me, we're not. This isn't to go after poor people." But again, why is the threshold so low if you're not using this to go after poor people? What multi-billionaire or multi-millionaire dodging taxes are you going to catch by monitoring accounts with $600 in them? Zanisha says, if a rich, white, Ivy League educated lawyer, Donziger, can't get a trial by jury, you know that little things in the Constitution, what shot do we have in the legal system if targeted? Yeah. And he's mentioned that they do those they like the judge would do that exact thing thousands of times throughout the year. It's done thousands of times in this country. People are denied their right to a jury trial, and we have no idea how like outrageous the situation is in each of these cases. If it's outrageous as in the Stephen Donziger case, but either way, they're denied their right to a jury trial, which is crazy. And through this fucking loophole that, oh, if we're going to limit it 6 months, motherfucker, you know what 6 months in prison does to somebody? If, like, first of all, their life is derailed. He already is disbarred over this, and who knows what could happen to him in jail or in prison. So like, and then when you get out, you have that on your record. So to say like, oh, trust me, fuck your constitutional rights if we only limit it to 6 months, that makes absolutely no fucking sense. And as far as regular people in the justice system, they get screwed horribly. Um, I actually wanted I'm interested in going to law school to honestly do work similar to like Stephen Donziger, but even with like criminal defense, because there are a lot of people who like they say, oh, you have a right to representation and all this stuff, and if you don't have a right, like if you don't have the money to afford a lawyer, you get like a public defender and things like that. But the public defender system is so overwhelmed that like sometimes there will literally be one attorney be like in charge of over 100 cases or something like that, or dozens of cases, and a lot of the times they're overworked, and sometimes they're not that great lawyers, and people's whole life be ruined because they don't have good representation, and sometimes they'll even be railroaded because they know that they aren't going to get good representation. So the prosecutors will come to them and be like, hey man, you can either take this to trial and lose and get like 20 years, or you can take a plea and do 5 years. Even if they're not guilty, they just have no way of defending themselves. So this system is incredibly rigged, especially if you're poor and you don't and you're a person of color. So yeah, they do a Steve Donziger like that. They'll do other people way worse.